Good Times may have redefined the television sitcom, celebrating the resilience of an African-American family surviving in Chicago's housing projects. But behind Esther Rolle's powerful performance and the infectious laughter of Dynamite was a cast marked by heartbreak, silence, and tragedy. Fame did not save them. In fact, it pushed many toward endings darker than Florida Evans's devastating cry of "damn, damn, damn" when James died on screen. Nearly 47 years later, their stories remain so haunting that once you hear them, you'll never watch this classic the same way again. From bitter feuds that tore the cast apart to silent illnesses that claimed beloved stars, from elder abuse allegations that shocked Hollywood to careers that crumbled under the weight of typecasting, the real-life drama behind Good Times was far more devastating than any script Norman Lear could have written. These weren't just actors playing a struggling family. They became one, and the price they paid for bringing authenticity to America's living rooms would haunt them for decades. John Amos, the father who fought and fell. John Allen Amos Jr. was born on December 27, 1939 in Newark, New Jersey. He was 34 years old when he stepped into the role of James Evans Sr., the hard-working patriarch who juggled multiple jobs to keep his family afloat in the Cabrini Green housing projects. A former football player turned actor, Amos had already made his mark on television, but Good Times was supposed to be his crowning achievement. A chance to portray a strong, dignified black father figure at a time when such representations were rare on American television. But behind the scenes, John Amos was fighting a battle that would ultimately destroy his time on the show and shadow his legacy. From the very beginning, he clashed with producers over the direction Good Times was taking. Amos had signed on to portray a multidimensional family struggling with real issues: poverty, racism, unemployment. But as Jimmy Walker's character, JJ, and his dynamite catchphrase skyrocketed in popularity, the show began shifting focus. What started as a groundbreaking family drama was morphing into a vehicle for Walker's comedic antics. And Amos was horrified. He believed the buffoonish portrayal of JJ was perpetuating harmful stereotypes about black families, undermining everything the show was supposed to represent. He spoke up, loudly and repeatedly, demanding better scripts and more realistic storylines. His passion for authenticity made him a disruptive force in the eyes of producers, and Norman Lear's team grew tired of his complaints. The tension reached a boiling point when Amos was labeled a disruptive element on set. As the years passed through the mid-1970s, the relationship between Amos and the production team deteriorated beyond repair. Despite the show's success and his character's popularity with audiences behind closed doors, his days were numbered. In 1976, after just 3 seasons, John Amos was fired. His character was killed off in a devastating car accident in Mississippi, a death that shocked viewers and left Florida Evans a widow. The cruel twist? Amos had fought so hard to preserve the dignity of black fatherhood on television that he lost his job. He had wanted James Evans to be more than a caricature, but the industry that celebrated him offered little support when he stood his ground. While he would go on to have a successful career, starring in the groundbreaking miniseries Roots and memorable roles in Coming to America, the bitterness of his Good Times departure never fully healed. Through the decades that followed, John Amos continued working steadily, but his later years would be marked by tragedy far worse than any television drama. In 2023, allegations of elder abuse surfaced when his daughter Shannon publicly claimed that her brother Casey Amos was exploiting their father, who was reportedly suffering from dementia. The family feud became increasingly public and ugly, with accusations of financial manipulation, neglect, and wrongful death allegations flying between siblings. John Amos died on August 21, 2024, at the age of 84 from congestive heart failure. But his death wasn't announced until weeks later, sparking even more controversy. His daughter filed a wrongful death lawsuit against her brother, alleging that neglect and exploitation hastened their father's demise. A tragic fate for someone who had spent his entire career fighting for dignity, respect, and authentic representation, only to have his final years marked by family conflict, alleged abuse, and a delayed death announcement that shocked the entertainment world. Esther Rolle, the matriarch's silent battle. Esther Rolle was born on November 8, 1920 in Pompano Beach, Florida. She was 53 years old when she brought Florida Evans to life, the fierce, God-fearing matriarch who held her family, together with unwavering strength and love. Before Good Times, Rolle had already played the character on Maude, where Florida worked as a maid. She was a seasoned actress, deeply committed to her craft and to portraying Black women with dignity and complexity. To her, Florida Evans was more than a character. She was a representation of Black mothers everywhere who fought daily battles to keep their families fed, clothed, and hopeful. Yet beneath her commanding on-screen presence, Esther Rolle carried the weight of profound disappointment and physical suffering. Like John Amos, she grew increasingly frustrated with the direction Good Times was taking. She despised the way Jay Jarre's character was written, calling him 18 and he doesn't work. He can't read or write. He doesn't think. Rolle felt betrayed by producers who had promised a show about a dignified Black family, but instead seemed content to let stereotypical comedy overshadow the serious themes they had set out to explore. The tension between Rolle and Jimmy Walker was palpable. They barely spoke off camera, and she made no secret of her disdain for what she viewed as the show's descent into minstrelsy. When John Amos was fired in 1976, Rolle was devastated. Without him, the family dynamics she had fought to protect was shattered. She returned for the fourth season, but left after its conclusion in 1977, unable to stomach the show's direction any longer. As the years passed into the late 1970s and early 1980s, Esther Rolle continued her career, appearing in films and television movies, but she was also quietly battling a devastating force that would eventually claim her life. She had been diagnosed with diabetes, a disease that slowly ravaged her body. In the 1990s, her health deteriorated significantly. She required regular dialysis treatments as her kidneys failed, and the once vibrant actress who had commanded the screen with such power was weakening. Despite her illness, Rolle continued, working when she could, appearing in memorable roles including the 1997 film Rosewood and Maya Angelou's Down in the Delta. But the diabetes was relentless, and her body was failing. Esther Rolle died on November 17, 1998, at the age of 78 from complications of diabetes. She passed away at her home in Culver City, California, just 9 days after her birthday. The industry mourned the loss of one of its most principled actresses, but her death also highlighted a heartbreaking irony. This woman, who had fought so hard for dignity and respect in her professional life, had spent her final years in physical agony, her body betraying her, even as her legacy remained intact. Notably, Jimmy Walker was the only Good Times cast member who did not attend her funeral, a final testament to the fractured relationships that had defined the show's behind-the-scenes reality. Jeanette DuBois, The Unexpected Silence. Jeanette Teresa DuBois was born on August 5, 1932 in Brooklyn, New York. She was 42 years old when she joined Good Times in its second season as Willona Woods, the Evans family's vivacious, fashion-forward neighbor who became a surrogate aunt to the children. DuBois brought an infectious energy to the role, and Willona quickly became a fan favorite, the gossipy but good-hearted friend who could always be counted on for a laugh and a helping hand. Beyond acting, DuBois was multi-talented. She co-wrote and sang the iconic theme song, Movin' On Up, for the Jeffersons, and later won 2 Emmy Awards for her voice work on the PJs. But behind her vibrant persona, Jeanette DuBois was a woman who valued her privacy intensely. After Good Times ended in 1979, she continued working steadily in television and film, but she kept her personal life largely out of the spotlight. She never married again after divorcing in the 1960s, and she focused her energy on her career and her 2 children. In her later years, she co-founded the Pan-African Film Festival, championing Black cinema and supporting emerging filmmakers. To those who knew her, she seemed healthy, active, and engaged with life. There were no public reports of serious illness or declining health. Through the late 2010s, DuBois continued making appearances and remained involved in the entertainment industry. She was approaching 88 years old and still seemed vibrant. Then on February 17, 2020, Jeanette DuBois was found dead in her Glendale, California home. She had died peacefully in her sleep, apparently from natural causes. Her death was completely unexpected, Even her family was shocked. No cause of death was immediately announced, though later reports suggested she had suffered cardiac arrest. The industry that celebrated her offered tributes and memories, but her sudden passing left many unanswered questions. Jeanette DuBois died at the age of 87, but the unexpectedness of her death highlighted how even those who seem healthy and active can be taken without warning. For a woman who had brought so much laughter and life to millions of viewers, her quiet, solitary death seemed achingly unfair. She had survived the feuds and tensions of Good Times, built a successful career beyond the show, and dedicated herself to uplifting Black cinema, yet in the end, she died alone in her sleep. Her passing announced only after the fact. A devastating force had claimed her without warning, and the world lost one of television's most beloved supporting actresses before anyone even knew she was in danger. Johnny Brown, the comedian's final heartbreak. Johnny Brown was born on June 11, 1937 in St. Petersburg, Florida. He was 38 years old when he joined Good Times in 1975 as Nathan Bookman, the bumbling building superintendent who was constantly on the receiving end of the Evans family's jokes and complaints. Bookman was a comic relief character, hapless, often clueless, but ultimately good-hearted. Brown brought impeccable comedic timing to the role, drawing on his experience as a singer, dancer, and comedian who had been a regular on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. He was a seasoned performer who could sing, dance, act, and make people laugh with equal skill. Yet beneath his jovial exterior, Johnny Brown's later years would be marked by the relentless march of time and the cruel realities of aging. After Good Times ended, Brown continued working in television and film, appearing in projects like Life with Eddie Murphy and lending his voice to animated series. He maintained a relatively low profile compared to his co-stars, focusing on his family and his marriage to June Russell, which lasted for decades. Brown seemed to have found contentment in his later years, staying out of the public eye and enjoying time with his children and grandchildren. Those who knew him remembered a kind, funny man who had lived a good life in show business without the scandals that plagued so many others. As the years passed into the 2020s, Johnny Brown entered his mid-80s. Age was catching up with him, but he remained in relatively good spirits. Then in early 2022, Brown went to a routine doctor's appointment in Los Angeles to have his pacemaker checked. The appointment seemed unremarkable, just a standard follow-up for a man managing the cardiovascular issues common in elderly patients. But shortly after leaving the doctor's office, something went terribly wrong. Johnny Brown suddenly went into cardiac arrest and collapsed. Despite emergency efforts and transport to a nearby hospital, he could not be revived. Johnny Brown died on March 2 in 2022 at the age of 84. He had gone from a routine medical appointment to dead within hours, a shocking and sudden end for a man who had seemed to be managing his health conditions. His daughter Sharon announced his death on social media, describing her devastation and the shock of losing her father so abruptly. A cruel twist for someone who had spent decades making people laugh. His final day began with a routine checkup and ended with his family mourning his sudden loss. The industry that celebrated his comedic genius offered tributes, but Johnny Brown's death underscored the fragility of life and how quickly everything can change. He had survived the ups and downs of a long career, maintained a loving family, and seemed to be enjoying his golden years, until a single moment of cardiac failure took it all away. While death claimed several members of the Good Times cast, those who survived carried their own burdens that are worth acknowledging. Jimmy Walker, now 78, became so identified with J.J. Evans that he struggled to find serious acting roles after the show ended. Despite being the breakout star, he found himself typecast and ultimately returned to stand-up comedy, performing to this day but never recapturing the cultural phenomenon he once was. The relationships he damaged during Good Times, particularly with Esther Rolle and John Amos, haunted his legacy, and his absence from Rolle's funeral spoke volumes about wounds that never healed. Bernadette Stanis, who played Thelma, also faced the challenge of typecasting after Good Times ended. She made sporadic television appearances, but never achieved the same level of success. She went through multiple marriages and eventually reinvented herself as an author and motivational speaker, but the shadow of Thelma followed her everywhere. Ralph Carter, who portrayed the politically conscious youngest son Michael, essentially disappeared from acting after Good Times. He was a child star whose career peaked at age 18, and he struggled to find work as an adult actor. He eventually left the entertainment industry entirely, working behind the scenes and largely staying out of the public eye. Nearly 47 years later, Good Times remains a groundbreaking sitcom that changed television by showing an authentic Black family struggling with poverty, racism, and resilience. Yet the real lives behind it are far more tragic than any damn moment on screen. From John Amos's bitter firing and devastating final years marked by alleged elder abuse, to Esther Rolle's silent battle with diabetes that ravaged her body while she fought for dignity on screen. From Jeanette DuBois' unexpected death alone in her sleep, to Johnny Brown's sudden cardiac collapse hours after a routine doctor's visit. Every member of the cast carried a story the cameras never captured. These actors didn't just portray struggle, they lived it. They fought against stereotypes, battled with producers, endured physical suffering, and ultimately paid prices far higher than any paycheck could compensate. The feuds that tore the cast apart behind the scenes revealed that even when portraying a tight-knit family, real relationships could fracture beyond repair. The industry that celebrated their performances offered little protection against typecasting, health crises, or the exploitation that marked John Amos's final years. Good Times brought laughter to millions and broke barriers for Black representation on television. But for those who made it happen, the cost was immeasurable. Their legacy is complicated, a triumph of groundbreaking television forever shadowed by personal tragedies, professional disappointments, and relationships destroyed by artistic differences. Which journey struck you the most? Was it John Amos's fight for dignity that cost him everything? Esther Rolle's principled stand that left her isolated and in pain? Or the sudden losses of Jeanette DuBois and Johnny Brown, taken without warning after decades of bringing joy to others? Comment below and don't forget to subscribe as we uncover the forgotten truths behind Hollywood's greatest legends. Because sometimes the real story behind the laughter is the one that breaks your heart.